Hello and welcome to another Dungeons & Dragons session dramatization set in the world of Alter Aeon. Our protagonists are Kara the Warmage, Morden the Hexblade, Tess the Sorceress, and Sened the Favored Soul. I am Shadowfax, the Dungeon Master. In the last battle of this session, Tess's player learned that she could use second-level spell slots to cast first-level spells. Our heroes had taken refuge in the hut nearest Fort Marguera's entrance. It was time for them to storm the castle. The front gate of the fort had been smashed to bits. Our heroes snuck into position on either side of the gateway. The sky was clear, and Gothos was waxing, shedding enough light to see a short distance past the gate. It led into a courtyard, where 3 drowsers appeared to be working, stacking the bodies of villagers into piles. Sened cast Vigor on Morden, and the battle began. Sened was the first one in, screaming a battle cry as he sent his heavy mace crashing down on one of the drowsers. That drowser and the one next to it both caught him in their pincers and tore at his body in different directions. Sened's muscles screamed in agony, and his nerves felt like they were on fire as his body failed to maintain cohesion while the 2 giant beetles tugged on him. Kara had followed Sened in, but had to halt and stop her ears as she felt the 3rd drowser rhythmically buzz its wings and try to put them all to sleep. That is, everyone except Tess, who, thanks to her elven heritage, was immune to the tirbana's sleep effects. She blasted one of the drowsers tugging on Sened with a trio of magic missiles, and it let go of him and started heading towards Kara. In spite of this, Sened's body went limp, and he passed out from the pain. The remaining drowser continued to dig into his unconscious body with its pincers. Tess wondered where Morden had gone, and cast a glance aside to see that he had fallen asleep and was slouched against the left jamb of the gate. Panic set in, and she called out to Kara that the 2 of them were the only ones still up. Kara cast Kelgor's Firebolt at the drowser still chewing on Sened, and Tess cast Magic Missile at it, as well, killing it. Kara and Tess then concentrated fire on the next drowser, killing it as well. The last of the drowsers started to run, heading toward the courtyard exit on the left that would head into the covered corridor that wrapped around the perimeter of the fort and lead into an inner hallway that ran through the fort's interior. Kara fried it with Kelgor's Firebolt before it could get away. It was at this point that Morden woke up and asked what was going on, his dark companion reappearing when he regained consciousness. Tess explained while Kara dug Sened's wand of Cure Light Wounds out of his shoulder bag. She pointed it at Sened, but she activated it wrong and wasted a charge. She tried again, only for it to fail once more, shooting out smoke and sparks. After the 3rd time, she got it right, and the healing spell woke him up, but just barely. Fernando, who had also been put to sleep, woke up and sleepily crawled onto his mistress's shoulder. Even though Sened wanted to stay and save the people in the courtyard, he realized that he was in no condition to help, and the party retreated to the hut next to the fort to recuperate. The group searched the hut looking for something to use as earplugs. They instead found something else interesting, a barrel of pitch. The party discussed the usefulness of this find and decided that they would bring it with them when they returned to fight the turbanas left in the fort. However, as they were resting, some more turbanas came out to fight them. Morden was keeping watch, so he woke the rest of the group and told them to be quiet and let the turbanas pass. The party stayed quiet so as not to alert the unknown number of turbanas, but when one of them buzzed its wings, it put Sened to sleep, and they heard the clanging of his breastplate as he fell to the ground. Morden hauled Sened out the back window, and the other party members followed. As the drowsers entered the hut, Tess shot one with her crossbow. Morden lit one of Tess's torches, and using the torchlight, they could see that there were 3 drowsers. Kara killed the one Tess had wounded with an acid splash spell. Morden then threw the torch into the hut. He was trying to aim for the ceiling to light the thatched roof on fire, but it bounced off the furniture and landed in the barrel of pitch. In an instant, the hut was ablaze. One drowser was burnt to a crisp, and the remaining badly scorched tirbana crawled out of the ashes and was put down by Kara's morning star. The party then retreated to another hut that hadn't been burnt down and remained there until morning. No more turbanas came out to bother them. Our heroes woke up mid-morning and prepared themselves to return to the fort, with spells fully recovered. The weather was bright and cheery, in stark contrast to the current state of the village. They once again entered the fort. Sened once again approached the unconscious people that the turbanas had placed there, but his allies convinced him to save his healing magic for the upcoming confrontation. The quartet headed down the east corridor from the courtyard. The stone walls were in good condition, but the wooden roof was broken in spots that allowed the sunlight from outside to brighten up the interior of the fort. The passageway turned to the left and went about 50 feet before they encountered a wooden door. It was stuck shut, but Morden worked on it for a couple of minutes and got it open. Beyond the door was more corridor, which went for another 50 feet before turning left again to the west. They spotted another drowser, which retreated as soon as it saw them. Our heroes pursued, rounding the corner and entering the fort's back hallway in time to see the drowser flee deeper into the fort. It ran to the end of the interior hallway and shut the door behind it before the party could get a shot off. Our heroes cautiously moved down the hallway, past the sets of doors on either side, to the end. It smelled terrible inside, even worse than in the village outside. The door at the end of the hallway was similar to the one that they encountered earlier, and was likely stuck because it had been slammed shut. As Morden started to pry it open, the party heard a loud crash on the other side of the door that knocked the crowbar Morden had been using from his hands. Tess suggested blasting the door open, but the others said that they should save their spells. After tugging on the door for a while, Morden concluded that it wasn't just stuck. It had been locked from the other side. He then took out his warhammer and proceeded to smash the door in. Slamming through the thick slab of wood, he broke the slide lock and pulled it open. On the other side, there was a wooden portcullis. Through the gaps in the gate, they could see that a large chamber lay beyond. The room had a banquet table and an upholstered throne behind the table. On the throne sat a monster that looked like a cross of a human with a giant arthropod, as if it were a purple bipedal winged vinegaroo with human hands instead of pincers. Kara said that it was the Turbana spawner, the leader of the colony. The creature sat up and cast a spell on itself that caused a translucent double of itself to appear next to it. The drowser from earlier was just inside the gateway, and it cast a blur spell on itself in preparation for our hero's entry. The portcullis proved to be much tougher than the door. Morden and Sened tried to lift it, but it wouldn't budge. They started to bang on it with their weapons, and the drowser buzzed its wings and tried to put them to sleep. Surprisingly, they all managed to resist it. Though they probably could have stuck their hands through the gaps in the portcullis to cast spells, the nearby drowser and its clacking pincers discouraged them from doing so. Tess got out her crossbow, but the drowser moved to the side beyond their view, and the spawner took cover behind the banquet table. The group agreed that now was the time to use magic. Before assaulting the door, Sened cast Vigor on Morden and Nimbus of Light on himself. Tess drank a potion of mage armor. Then, using a shatter spell, Kara blasted the portcullis to splinters, and the showdown began. The spawner rose from behind the banquet table to face our heroes and launched an orb of acid at Kara as a quartet of eye-wings descended from a hole in the ceiling to form a protective screen between the spawner and the party. Thanks to her magic armor, the acid rolled harmlessly off of Kara. Morden dashed through the remains of the broken gate and dueled with the drowser. He stationed his dark companion right next to the spawner and hexed it. The spawner gave the translucent black dog a sidelong glance, but otherwise ignored it. While Morden kept the drowser busy, the other three entered the chamber. Kara and Tess targeted the eye-wings with magic missile and ice knife spells to clear the way to the spawner, while Sinead held his Nimbus of Light spell in reserve for the spawner itself, zapping it with a silvery beam of light as soon as he had a clear shot. The Hexblade had a rough time with the Drowser, whom he had trouble striking due to the latter's blur spell. At one point, it injected Morden with a poison that dulled his hearing and made his vision blurry, but after a few swings he managed to nail the bugger and put it down with his sonic warhammer. It was at this point that the spawner hypnotically buzzed its wings, and unfortunately, Sinead succumbed to the magic sleep spell and passed out. Tess could also feel that Fernando had fallen asleep. She caught him and stowed him in her backpack before he could fall off her shoulder and hurt himself. Despite the loss of its entourage, the spawner took courage after taking out the party's healer and moved forward to attack. Morden's dark companion followed it, and Morden himself moved to intercept. Being much stronger than its underlings, the spawner rapidly got the upper hand as it repeatedly bit and beat on Morden while evading his attacks with its displacement spell. With its bite attacks, the spawner injected Morden with more poison, even more powerful than that of the Drowser that bit him before. It couldn't evade Tessa's magic missiles, but the invisible force projectiles seemed to do little damage to the spawner. Kara's ice knife fared little better. While Morden continued to melee, the girls fired off another round of offensive spells, slowly whittling the monster's health down. However, without a healer to fix him up, Morden was forced to withdraw, and the spawner moved on to melee with the War Mage. Kara fired off a bolt of sizzling ashes to burn the spawner, while doing her best to evade the tirbana's swings. Tessa dragged Sinead under the table to protect him and fired yet another magic missile spell into the spawner's back, damaging its delicate wings. Morden got out his sling and battered the spawner with a bullet, hanging back to give Sinead's vigor spell time to heal him. The spawner glanced upward at the hole in the ceiling, and then made another assault on Kara, beating her down to her knees with slammed fists, and bit her, injecting her with poison that made her head spin. But Kara was not one to give up, and with all of her concentration, she cast a spell and showered the spawner with the full force of another ice knife spell, while Tess peppered it with another magic missile spell, and Morden struck it with another sling bullet. Pieces of chitin shell flew in all directions as his Tirbana spawner finally succumbed to its wounds and careened forward, face-planting on the floor. Kara, Morden, and Tess breathed a sigh of relief. The former two were badly injured, and the War Mage and Sorceress were low on spells. It was just then that Sinead began to wake up, weakly asking, "Did we win?" But before anyone could answer, they heard the flapping of wings, and another monster began to descend into the throne room through the hole in the roof. It was the Vivisector that had nearly killed Morden the day before. Tess tried to end the fight quickly by frightening the Vivisector with an image of a red dragon, ready to gobble him up, but the monster saw right through the illusion. It spotted its former foe and charged the Hexblade, tearing into him with its claws and stinging him. The poison from its stinger sapped Morden's strength, making it hard to move or even lift his hammer. He was, however, able to hex the Vivisector, and directed his dark companion to stay near it. Kara blasted the monster with Kilgore's firebolt, which seemed to barely hurt it. Tess gave it a taste of her magic missiles, which it definitely took notice of. As Sinead healed Morden, the Vivisector retreated a few feet and disappeared to grant itself a brief reprieve. However, Tess was on the ball, and it would have no such relief. Right away she cast glitter dust, covering it with a fine gold powder that rendered its natural invisibility useless. Morden and Kara immediately pounced on it, although Morden noticed that it seemed to be immune to the sonic damage of his warhammer. Kara cast Melf's acid arrow at the beast, while Sinead cast Cure Serious Wounds on her. Because Morden had to close to melee to strike it with his hammer, the Vivisector took the opportunity to tear into Morden once again with its claws, this time knocking him out. It then moved on to a very surprised Sinead. Sinead was unprepared for such an assault, and it nearly knocked him out too. More magic missiles from Tess rained down on the vivisector, and Kara used acid splash against it. Though visibly damaged, the vivisector was still up and fighting, and trying to eviscerate Sened. Tess was out of offensive spells, but she wasn't out of options. She got out her crossbow and fired a shot, while Kara used a Ray of Frost spell. Despite it being one of the weakest spells in Kara's arsenal, it was enough to bring the vivisector down, and it fell to pieces, spilling its organs and shattered carapace to the ground in a reeking heap. Our heroes were exhausted, both physically and mentally, but they were victorious. The vigor spell cast on Morden soon restored him to good health, and the party thoroughly searched the throne room to make sure there weren't any more enemies hiding in the shadows. They took the magic equipment off of the spawners and vivisector's remains, and headed out of the throne room and back down the hallway. Sened led them to the last door on the right, and they entered into a shrine of Denton. Tess asked if they should be taking anything from there, but Sened said it would be fine. He opened a panel on the side of the altar and collected its contents, which included a wand, a potion, and a set of magic bracers. They returned to the fort's courtyard, and Sened went to work. Sened discovered Lord Pelham's personal cleric and his former teacher, Pilkim Heingander, among those that had been stored there, and used a scroll of Cure Disease and his wand of Cure Light Wounds to restore him to good health. While the others searched the fort to make sure it was secure, Sened and Pilkim used their skills and spells to heal the people that were not only there in the fort, but in the entire village. The task took them the entire afternoon, and it was nearly twilight before they had attended to everyone they could find. There were about 100 villagers still left alive. Many had died due to the poor care they had received from the turbanas, and some villagers were missing altogether. Among the dead were Lord Pelham and his wife, and their sons. The eldest surviving member of the noble family was Lady Emery Elizabeth, Lord Pelham's oldest daughter, who assumed rulership of the village. The survivors were grateful for all that our heroes had done to save their village, and gave them all the treasures from their humble village that our heroes could carry, including a hoard of silver pieces, precious gems, and a painting of Santa Rita, which they found a magic coin inside. And that is where our session ended. Please like the video and subscribe to our channel to continue following the story of our heroes. Transcripts of our Dungeons & Dragons sessions are available at www.lawful-evil.org/DND. If you enjoyed this and don't already play the game this is based on, you can explore the world of Alter Aeon for yourself by visiting www.alteraeon.com. Remember, the family that plays together stays together. Thanks for listening, and happy mudding, everybody.
Alteraeon.com. That's ALTERAEON.com.